All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining another Movement Mamas. We're really excited tonight to be joined by our friend for a very long time, a friend in the movement, comrade in the movement, Wendy Hoon. So I'm going to just kick it off and ask everyone an intro question. Just tell us your name, where you're from organizationally and geographically, and what inspired you to do this work. So I'll go first. Danielle Atkinson. I am in Michigan. I'm with Mothering Justice, and I think what really inspired me to work on issues of care and women's issues is my mom, who today's her birthday, actually, moved to this country without her husband and my older sister, and was made to make a way for them to come to this country and have a better life for my sister and I. Well, me eventually. Nobody was thinking about me because I wasn't in existence, but it's really my mom and immigrants all over this country is why I do it. So I'm going to pass it to Ling Ling.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Ling Ling Chansey. I am based in Atlanta, and I am currently the ED of a 9 to 5 National Association of Working Women. What led me to this work? I think the biggest influence that really led me to this work are my parents. Right. I saw them organizing in the community when I was a child, working behind the counter of a very small grocery store that my parents owned, and, fighting for the rights of the community folks. And, our home became kind of like the central organizing station or the store. And also my lived experience as a immigrant to this country and what I've experienced myself firsthand, the discrimination, the racism, and everything else in between. So that's why I'm doing what I do right now. And I am going to throw it to Andrea.
Hey, nice to see everyone. My name is Andrea Paluso. I'm the Executive Director of Family Forward Action and Family Forward Oregon, based here in Portland, Oregon. And what led me to the work? I mean, similar to what's been said, my mom, who divorced when I was an adolescent teenager, and we went through a lot of real financial struggles, and just kind of watching her try to manage working in really low wage work at the time and be a single mom. And that was definitely an inspiration. And then when I became a mom myself, I think I had some idea that I was going to be able to make more decisions, more choices about how I structured my life and feel more supported in a variety of different ways, and really didn't. And that really inspired me, I think, to focus here. So I'll pass it to Mary.
Hello, I am Mary Ignatius. I am the statewide organizer of Parent Voices in California, and I am based in San Francisco. Similarly, personally growing up with immigrant parents, and my father died when I was really young, so really watching the grit and perseverance of my immigrant mama, who worked as a registered nurse for 40 years. And then professionally, I studied social work, wanting to kind of impact systems change. And on my first day of my internship with this grassroots organization, a member came up to me, and we were all excited to be there to help folks. And she came up to me and she said, Mary, we have more fear of social workers than we have of police officers in this community. And it was really that moment where that light bulb went off, and I just realized the power that social workers have in communities. You can take away people's homes, their children, their food, their paycheck. And that moment, I just decided the type of social worker I wanted to be. And really that led me to organizing and really building partnership and working with community, being led by community to identify the solutions. And that's what I've been committed to for the last 15 years of Parent Voices. So I will pass it to Erica.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erica Washington. I am the executive director of Make It Work Nevada, Make It Work Nevada Education Fund. We are located in very hot Las Vegas. And I got into this work, I think, for a lot of different reasons, but I started my journey off as a journalist, and I love telling stories. I love hearing other people tell me about their lives, even the things that seem mundane. And then I also worked for an organization that did direct services for folks who, had trouble with rent or utilities. And as I was working for that organization, what I realized is that there are people who are directly affected by policies that are made by people who have never been in the situation of needing to stand in line and wait for rental assistance. And so once I found out that this was even an actual occupation, an actual job where I can advocate for and with Black people and other people of color around these issues, I was all in, because I realized that the people who make the most change are the people who are directly affected. And so I think that it's really important that we listen to those voices, that we hear those stories, that we amplify those folks so that actual change can be made, and change that actually makes sense. So it is my pleasure now to be able to introduce our one of our favorite movement mamas, who you all have not had a chance to meet. Her name is Wendy Hoon, and she serves as the 20th director of the Women's Bureau. She was appointed by President Biden on February 1st, 2021. Wendy is skilled at coalition building, bridging strategies across grassroots community organizing, public sector, and policy making at the state and national levels. She has held senior positions in Maryland state government, private philanthropy, overseeing large-scale results-driven initiatives for worker and family and economic justice. For the past 10 years, Wendy's led Family Values at Work, which is actually how we all met. National organization of grassroots coalitions that has won more than 60 new paid leave policies, bringing new rights to 55 million workers and their loved ones, and are organizing to win greater access to childcare and fair wages and employment conditions for all workers. Recognizing the ways in which her own family would be excluded from new policies for paid time to care, Wendy spearheaded the development of the Family Justice Network, building cross-movement organizing among paid leave advocates, communities of color groups working for reproductive and disability justice, equality for LGBTQ individuals, and organized labor that made inclusive family recognition a hallmark of the paid leave movement. Good Lord, Wendy, you've done a lot of things. Under Wendy's leadership, Family Values at Work staff and board grew and are now majority women of color. She was also instrumental in bringing together dozens of organizations to form a coordinated national campaign known as Paid Leave for All. Both born and raised in Hawaii, Wendy graduated from Vassar College before earning her master's degree in philanthropic studies and nonprofit management from Indiana University. And she's also an avid soccer player. Wendy lives with her wife and her 2 kids in Silver Springs, Maryland. Welcome, Wendy. I'm so glad to be here. And, I should probably have read your bio some years ago. I was like, dang, she does a lot of stuff.
Who told you to read that whole thing?
Danielle did, actually. But I want to ask you first the same question that we've all just answered about what led you to this work, besides that really great resume that you now have.
Yeah, that was totally embarrassing. Thank you for that. That was way too generous. I will get you all back someday, but oh my gosh, it's so fun to be with you all again. I only wish we could be in person, but what led me to this work? I think I was really angry. I was really angry at the whole welfare reform debate, and sort of, coming into political consciousness at the time, and just angry. Like, what was that debate about? Why were we blaming people for taking care of kids? And it wasn't just people, it's like all women of color, and just could not believe that we were devoting that many resources and communication strategies and bad policy ideas. And, it was like the country was in grips over how we're going to, make it even more hard for parents to take care of their kids and specifically moms. So I was frustrated with the hypocrisy of it all, and sort of caught on to some folks who were leading work that, I eventually understood was the origins of family values at work, and all the mamas that went before us, and just really committed to figuring out a different way to have this conversation. So ever since then, have been in touch with all of you, and just grateful to be in the work with you. And Erica, when you were reading the bio, it named a number. I think it was like 55 million. I think y'all have won a few more policies, even in the past couple of months. So that number is even higher now. But glad to be here with you all.
Thank you, Wendy, for joining us. It's so exciting to be in company with you again after quite a few months that we've not seen your beautiful face. So, I have the task of really introducing what we're going to be speaking about today. The title that, we kind of gave ourselves for today's conversation is Never Built or Broken. I think, Wendy, you are the one that inspired this conversation. So, it is not by accident that women are struggling today in America, and even more so during this pandemic, right? We've seen women leaving the workforce. We've seen, lost wages. We've seen women deciding to, making difficult decisions on whether to pay their rent or put food on the table, or to pay for utilities or pay for childcare, like all of these things, right? Especially BIPOC women in our communities. So, we live in the patriarchal society here in America, and we know that there are so many inequalities that, I can't even name all of them, that exist in our society today, right? So the question is our system, is the system built for us, or is the system broken, right? Or has the system ever been built? So those are kind of the questions we've been grappling with and asking ourselves among the movement mamas. And one of the things, that has come up time and time again is this notion of traditional women's work, right? Or mama's work. It's the unpaid and underappreciated work that we do for our families and for our communities and everything else in between. So, we have been talking a lot about women in the care economy and the hidden labor, right? The care that we provide that is unseen often, but has a tremendous impact on consequence in our society. So, as a movement mama myself, I have 2 teenagers, and I, having lived experience about working in a low wage job and trying to decide, childcare was $150 a week. I was making $7.45, and just trying to figure out, like, is it even worth it to work? But at that point in time, yes, because after I pay for childcare, I still have a little bit money, just a tiny little bit money to pay for groceries, right? So our small little family really needed every cent and dollar that we could bring in. So my question for you, Wendy, is tell us a little bit about the origins of the Women's Bureau, because we are all very curious about the Women's Bureau, and also what kind of work are you engaging in right now?
Yeah, thanks, Ling Ling. So the Women's Bureau is actually celebrating its 100th year right now, June 5th of 2020, and we're rounding on our 100th year. And so, the history is it was authorized by law to, quote unquote, formulate standards and policies which shall promote the welfare of wage earning women, improve their working conditions, increase their efficiency, and advance their opportunities for profitable employment. So 100 years ago, that was the charge. And clearly sure, a lot has changed, a lot has improved. And also, to your theme, what has never been broken, what has never been built, what's still broken. I think we have a lot of work to do. So just say one other thing, by way of context, the Women's Bureau continues to be the only federal agency mandated by Congress to work exclusively on issues that affect women in the workplace and to represent the needs of wage earning women in the public policy process. So, that's our charge. We've been on the path for 100 years, and there's a lot of work to do, as I just said. So the things that, I'll come in a second to, what I think our charge is in the moment coming out of COVID, but I had an experience that really cemented for me, why I was going to do this job. So I didn't know it at the time, but I got into a conversation with a home care worker. We were in sort of a town hall setting. We were deep into COVID at the time. And so a home care worker in Texas, her name was Susie. And we're talking about, as we have been for years, if we had the care infrastructure that we actually needed to thrive, right? Not just like barely eke by, but to thrive, what would it look like? So it was actually a conversation about the care infrastructure. This was, sometime, middle of last year. And I happened to be paired with Susie in the conversation. I think she told me she was better than 60, maybe 65. And she loves her job as a home care provider, right? She's talking about, hard things like the folks that have been in her care during COVID and losing them at times, and, really thinking through, like, I'm going to be with them at the funeral, even though, I know it's tricky to be there, but they're my family. So really just the deep mission orientation. And then she kept, she went on and she said, and we're just chatting with each other before the official town hall starts. And she's talking about, I love my job. And, what really has been stressful to me is, not having any PPE, right? Not having enough. So she's feeling scared on the job, and she's talking about, but the young people who are coming up in this profession look to me to help train them. And I'm going to be, I realize at this moment, she's this awesome community hub. So all the young people are coming to her for training. And so I'm asking her a little bit, so what's going on? Where's the training? And seems like there needs to be more support. Yes, absolutely. For now, I just give them my cell phone number so that they can call me. And so we're talking a little bit more and go back to family. And she said, well, my dad passed. And so her mom had just moved in, and then also she lives with her partner. Both of them have health risks. And, she is frontline workforce. Susie's out there every day working for other folks, who she considers family, going home to family who are medically fragile. And, by the end of the conversation, she comes around to, well, and I mean, this has been a scary year. And also, we don't have paid sick days. And I just thought, oh my gosh, in this one woman, right, who anchors, I don't know, hundreds of families in that community, right? Not just her own. We've got no infrastructure around her to support, though she is doing the work that stands up the rest of the economy. And I thought, wow, in COVID, it just became, it became apparent in such a huge way that that all of these things that Susie was talking about are mutually reinforcing and in the wrong direction. So, if I look back on it, that was the moment where I was like, okay, I'm being called into this position. I'm going to do this job because we have to bring solutions at the scale of the problem in this moment. So, what we're focused on now, really trying to live into that charge and move as quickly as we can. Make sure that wages and working conditions for home care workers, for childcare workers, for all care workers, all low wage workers, anybody who feels vulnerable on the job, make sure that we are increasing wages, bettering working conditions, and specifically for, the care workforce to make sure that, and the reason why is because we know who are in those jobs. It's women of color, right? These are our communities. Making sure that more women are getting into the sort of pipelines to good jobs, right? So where are the good wages, and how come there are so few women in those jobs still? So I'm learning a lot in these past couple of weeks about, so what qualifies as a non-traditional occupation? Well, it's any job where there isn't at least 25% are women. There's still too many of those. And these are the pathways to good jobs. So what are we going to do about getting women, getting our communities into these pathways to good jobs? And as the whole country is having a conversation about the American Jobs Plan, the possibility of 19 million new jobs. So how many of those are going to really go to women, right? And women of color and people of color. Thinking about this is it, right? What was never built, what continues to be broken. What are the ways in which we're still penalized in our work for having caregiving responsibilities, for having families, for having kids, right? We've all lived with kids at home, having to be teacher, having to be, a house cleaner, having to be, holding our own day jobs down. But we're still penalized for having those caregiving responsibilities, and we just shouldn't be there anymore. We know how to fix this. And then finally, just thinking, about the fact that there is still too much, when I talked about women not being in certain sectors, there's still too much discrimination on the job. There's still too much, sexual harassment on the job. We need to really do some significant culture change to make sure that we're just eliminating that. Pregnancy discrimination should not be an issue, right? LGBTQ discrimination on the job should not be something that we have to deal with. Sexual harassment on the job. So, really, really leaning into that. But that's what we're up to as fast as we can.
Wendy, thank you for that. I think something that came up for me as you were talking about the Women's Bureau is just movements in general. And there have been movements for a lot of things. And I think that's the only way that we really see real change is with, a groundswell of movement of people who are marginalized. And so I want to ask you, but I want to ask everybody here on the panel, what movement do you think of in history that has or is changing how women are treated, and what next? So anyone who wants to answer that question, I'm going to start. Actually, I'm going to answer the question because I just also thought about Miss Ruby Duncan, which a lot of people don't know who Dr. Ruby Duncan is, and she is still alive and kicking. She founded Operation Life here in Las Vegas, and she is the reason why we have WIC offices here. We were one of the first places to have WIC offices in the country, and that was because of her. And she is as she would say, a poor Black woman who came here from Louisiana, and she got hurt on the job working on the Strip in the hotels, and then she wasn't able to get any benefits, and she had children, and so she needed to fight for welfare rights. And it's not about being lazy; it's about having that safety net. And they did a march down Las Vegas Boulevard on the Strip and into Caesar's Palace, and demanded rights, which then changed everything. And so I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have what I have today. I have 3 children, and I needed WIC for those children in order to feed them, in order for them to be the superstars that they are turning out to be. And we are just holding up the mantle and hopefully keeping that torch alive in passing some of the same bills that she was working on back in the 70s, we're still working on today. So she is my hero. She is also just a force to be reckoned with. But I think there are so many other movements out there, and maybe some that are obscure that people don't know about. So I'll throw it to y'all about what movements are really doing something for women or have done something for women in the past.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and I've been still thinking about this question. And there are so many, right? I think the paid leave for all and paid leave movement really is talking about work and what is work. And I think that's huge. So I wanted to kind of talk about that. I wanted to talk about trans women and just how they're standing up for their lives, and how we are really seeing this tier, right, of oppression, and how they are literally on the front lines. And we need to be continuing to put them in front, and their leadership is so important. But then I was also thinking about today, the House Oversight Committee had a hearing of the full body on birthing while Black, and how this movement of Black women demanding their voices be heard, because again, it's their lives and the lives of their babies, but more so their lives, because the disparities, infant mortality disparities will go down, but maternal mortality disparities continue to stay very large between Black women and their white counterparts. So, and then it made me think about Fannie Lou Hamer, who was forcibly sterilized. And we picture her in all of her brilliance, speaking with her hand in the air, her fist in the air, demanding that she be listened to because she was tired. And our bodies and the integrity of our bodies being tired is enough, right? But we don't think about the fact that she was put in a position where she was forcibly sterilized, and what it means to do that to a person. So that those two pictures of that one very strong woman continues to fuel me in the good ways and the bad ways. As someone trained in church organizing, we say that fire is something that you can is powerful, but you can use it for good. And so we want to burn like fire. And the image of Fannie Lou Hamer does that for me.
Yeah, similarly, Danielle, I was thinking about just the movements that are currently, or I guess the work that's currently connected to kind of the reproductive justice movement, and just like the move which is a framework articulated by Black women, as most movements start with Black women, but has included and built on work done before too by Indigenous women, other women of color, trans people, and this concept in that around bodily autonomy. And like the base of just like having access to bodily autonomy, and who does and doesn't get to have that in this country, right? So that framework is kind of moving us from thinking about rights to things, which we should have, but also to access to things, which is a different set of questions. It's pretty important to consider. And then these bigger issues around things like being able to really make real choices about how you parent, whether to parent, how to do that in a safe community, what you need to have in place to be able to make those kinds of choices. But like, again, like kind of back to the just root bodily autonomy piece, which has been really interesting to watch for me to kind of play out in COVID, because like historically and currently, right? Like Black people do not have bodily autonomy in this country. Indigenous people do not have bodily autonomy. Immigrants don't. Women don't. Women of color really don't. We've seen recent cases of immigrant women of color being forcefully sterilized now. Trans people don't. We're seeing all of these attacks on trans rights and trans children's rights to healthcare currently in a bunch of different states. And yet at the same time, we're seeing a lot of white folks protesting having to wear masks, like basic kind of courtesy things that like they're allowed a level of bodily autonomy that like is denied almost everyone else in this country.
I'll throw in Johnny Tillman, who was the founder of the National Welfare Rights Organization. Daughter sharecroppers, moved to Compton, California, was a laundry worker, got injured, had 6 children, was hesitant to turn to public assistance, but out of desperation finally did. And the way she was treated by her caseworkers and watching the other Black women in the office and how they were being treated led her to start that organization. And in the 60s, it grew to one of the largest grassroots organizations led by Black women and other women of color, and created some of the reforms around welfare and childcare regulations. And I just think about a lot of what came out of the 80s with the welfare queen stereotype and lie and myth is really embedded and permeates a lot of our public assistance programs. And, what we as movement mamas and what we've been doing in Parent Voices is really just calling that out and identifying the policies in these systems that, we're just saying we are no longer accepting as okay. We are committed to dismantling and ending the harm that those policies of fraud detection and monitoring and criminalizing and paperwork demanding, that we don't do for, the welfare kings who get tax breaks and have no accountability. But we just need to end that. And so I feel part of her legacy and really honored to continue to do that work and to give dignity to parenting.
I can go next, and I would just say that, as an immigrant woman that came to this country in my early 20s or barely 20s, and having had a lot of lived experiences and then later on become really politicized about in this country, I think about all the giants, all the AAPI giants, that women that came before me, right? You have Grace Lee Boggs that worked along the movement in the Black Panther. You have movement giants and mamas like Helen Zia that really worked on in the 80s, that really mobilized workers in sweatshops. And also when Vincent Chin was killed, beaten to death by two white men, right? And he worked on the assembly line of in Chrysler. And so, and then you have folks like Peggy Saika, that came in, and in 1996, when they were at the women's conference in Beijing, brought folks together like herself and, created a space for AAPI women in reproductive justice. And then for her to also create organization like APAN in San Francisco or the Bay Area to talk about climate issues, right? There are so many giants that I could name that, are still living and doing great work, even in their retirement or semi-retirement, and still pushing for change. And in the recent, months that we've seen all the shootings that have been happening across the country, and one that really hits home for me is the shooting here in Atlanta, and 6 Asian women were killed, right? And all the anti-Asian sentiment, the xenophobia that has really surfaced because of COVID. Right. I've been told at the very beginning or middle of COVID at the grocery store, like, go back to your country, and calling it the Chinese virus, and even having the mayor of the little town that I live in outside of Atlanta, talking about the Wuhan shake, like all of this, right? Like things that, we kind of experience and we go through, in our daily lives, and we kind of block it out because there is just so much anti-ness, right? In all the people of color communities. And it's just sad. But I feel so inspired by all these women that came before me that are really pushing for change. And, as we talk about the care economy today, we're also talking about the discrimination, the prejudice, the racism that exists in those infrastructure and the systems. So, I feel like the work that we're currently doing right now is so critical and important as we push forward for more change, right? As we dismantle the systems that are broken, and recreate, and rebuild the system that we want to see.
I get to recognize all of you then as the giants. The incredible leadership that just even exists on this one call is driving building to movement right now. Like each of you, the stories that you just told, all the connections you just made, you actually each of you bring that into your organizing. You see the connections between movements. You see the connections historically to what's happening now. You've lived these things. You're organizing in creative ways. You're winning things. You're winning real change. You're saying, let's take the power we just built from this win and roll it into the next tough thing that we're going to have to tackle together. And you do it in a really networked way. And you trade ideas, you share inspirations, you come together in these, to have chats like this, and you come together to build power politically. I mean, you're it.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I get the pleasure of asking the question after that nice flattery. We appreciate it. Okay, so the next question is, do you think the term women's issues is problematic? And if so, why? That's to everyone.
Yep. It's very problematic. I mean, I think, people hear women's issues and the first thing I think of is periods. It's like, what are we talking about? What's the woman issue that we're having? But if we're talking about income, if we're talking about childcare, paid time off, or what have you, that's not a lady problem. That's an economic problem. That's a structural issue, because no matter what your gender is, you are affected. And whether you have children or not, you're still affected, because it's a domino effect. If someone doesn't have childcare, they may not be able to come to work. And if you are their manager, then that leaves issues with, the work. And then also if there are customers involved, then that could lead to issues with your overall business and your bottom line. So that's not a lady issue. It's not about needing a tampon. It's about needing security financially and otherwise.
Erica just mic dropped it. I don't know who's gonna. I have nothing to add to that. That was like the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you call it women's issues, it puts the burden on us to fix it when we did not create the system that perpetuates the issues, right? If anything, it's a man's problem. It's a broken system that they created that is hurting them now, right? Like there are ways in which they have privilege, but the ways in which they don't are, you got to care for these kids too. Like we're in COVID. I don't know why you're looking at me. When are you taking off? So it's a man's problem, right? If we're talking about who has the onus to fix it, or who's responsible for it, and because we live in a society that's sexist, you say women's issues, then they have to, no one else has to deal with it, or it's definitely secondary, because there's everyone's issue. There's American issues, and then there's women's issues. So I want to take that out of the the phrases we use to describe the issues that disproportionately affect us.
Yeah, I would just say that, when you title, or when you give, the term woman's issue, when you're talking about issues that affect all of us on this planet, really, each and every one of us, you just built into the stereotypes, right? I always talk about, like, in my own experience is like, when you can't find childcare and you have to bring a baby to work, everybody looks at you at work like, oh my gosh, you can't even leave your baby at home and come to work and act like a professional. And then on the other side, if it's a man that couldn't find childcare and brought their baby to work, it's completely 180 degrees difference. Like, oh my gosh, he's such a good parent. He's such a sweet dad. Oh, look at him caring for his baby and bring the baby to work. And it's like, what's the difference there? Right? It's because it's so stereotyped. We are typecast almost, right? Like into certain roles. But it's not just us. Like, we didn't make this the situation ourselves. Like, we got here because we were, we're here together, either with our spouse or with our partners, whether it's in an LGBTQ marriage situation. Like, we all have decisions to make. So how can it be just a woman's issue? Right. And just what Erica said, like, are we talking about periods, or are we talking about issues that really impact all of us?
Yeah, I will admit, sometimes I struggle, like the Women's Bureau, because the way in which we organize and where I think at least all of us on this call, our values align, and what we've lived in our experience, right? It doesn't, to the extent that we build power as women and it's inclusive, that's one thing. But women, the term women's issues often feel very isolating, not inclusive. And so I think, I think we're all saying the same thing, right? That's not the container that we see ourselves in, want to be organizing with, our worldviews, who we think is standing right next to us, with us in this fight. To the extent that we build power as women, that's one thing. But to the extent that we're having conversations about women's issues, too narrow.
Yeah, I feel like it wouldn't be one of the calls if we let language down, if we didn't talk about patriarchy. It's just like, how do we get to the place where the framework allows us to talk about the fact that, like, this system, this structure actually harms everyone? It harms everyone. It puts everyone in a box. It limits our potential. It harms us all, right? And as long as we kind of silo the issues, these are women's issues, it gives permission to kind of ignore them because of, the power issues, but also it doesn't get us to the root of, like, how do we change things so that we're not all harmed by this way things are in the first place? Because we all are.
Yeah, I mean, if we were running a relay race, which I'm horrible at analogies, but I still use them. I'm still going to try it every time. I'm going to try it again. So we're running a relay race, and Erica breaks her leg. That's a whole team problem, right? Like, it's a whole team problem. So that's how we really need to see that members of our society, and there's so much work to be done to see us as a collective and a body that moves and wins and loses together. So I am going to ask us a question. What is the future for these issues? Women's issues, American issues, economic issues, pocketbook issues? What's the future for these issues?
I would say that it feels like we are at a moment in history where we are really going to consider some significant, hopefully long-term, hopefully bold investments in the care economy and in these issues. And my belief is that once we do it and it starts to trickle down to the ground and we start to see the results, people are going to be like, well, why haven't we been funding this for so long? Like, you're going to see communities, families transform, communities transform, the economy transform. And I just feel like when we finally bet on women's issues, we're going to win. And so I just feel hopeful that the tangible, concrete results are going to show so brightly that we will no longer be ignored.
I struggle with it to answer the question about what is the future of the issue, because I think about things like the ERA, and I think about abortion rights. I think about equal pay. And these are all things that people have been fighting for since before I was even thought of as a person. things have gotten better. There's obviously been some large steps that have been made. We have a vice president that is a woman of color. We have more women of color and more women in general in leadership positions across the world. There are women presidents in other countries. So, we're getting there, I guess, but I don't know what getting there really means when that means there's still day-to-day struggles and suffering that is so unnecessary. And I think that what I can only do is hope is that we get to a point where we don't have to fight for everything. Everything we don't have to always choose violence, I guess, as some folks say, when it comes to, getting the things that are necessary. But it feels like if you're not marching in the streets, if you're not shutting things down, if you're not striking, then we don't get what is just necessary, right? And so I'm hoping what the future is that folks can just see this is a problem and we need to fix it. And then we also don't need to tokenize those who are struggling the most in order to get that. It's one of the biggest struggles that I have doing this work sometimes is knowing that, as I said in the beginning, I am a storyteller and I believe stories are really, really important so people can know what's happening. But it always seems it's the onus on those who are struggling the most, that they have to open their wound and then reopen their wound to talk about just how bad it is for someone to finally say, oh, I get it. And then we'll do this little bitty thing that won't really help a whole lot of people, but baby steps, in the long term. So I'm hoping that we can get to a point where the onus is not on the women to have to explain why something is sexist, to explain why childcare is everyone's issue, that Black folks don't have to explain why something is racist, that we can actually just open up our eyes and really see that there are a lot of different issues in the world and they're all sort of tied together, and that we need to nip things in the bud and we need to really dig at the root of the problem in order to actually have significant long-term change, so that the children, which I think between all of us is 14, I think it was 14 kids between all of us, that they have a better life. Because that's a small gang right there, and those kids are not going to take any of this stuff lying down.
We need t-shirts like #MovementMamasGang for the kids. Yes to that. I hope that part of the work that we're doing is prompting some larger conversations that I think are related, like you said, Erica, everything's related, that are related to some of the climate justice conversations that we're having, that are really just about we've forever been on a path that's just about exploiting as much from people and planet as we possibly can, and not about assessing what do we need as people, as communities to really thrive, and what does that look like? And these conversations that we have about care and the importance of care and what counts as work and why, it shouldn't only be work that makes profits for somebody else that gets to count as work. And it doesn't have to be work for it to be valuable either. It doesn't even need to be paid work for it to be valuable, but that doesn't mean that you should suffer doing it or be exploited as you do it. That we're kind of trying to push at these conversations that are really about what is the future that we're trying to win here? What is the future that we want? What is the planet that we want to live on? And what kinds of communities do we want to live? And are we really able to get what we need to make those kinds of choices? And I do think that, we're working on specific issues, and we're, kind of working one at a time and trying to win as many things, really concrete wins, really concrete benefits and rights for people as we can. But it's part of this larger conversation that's really about what are we here for? If not to take care of each other and love each other, right? And how do we remove all of the barriers to folks being able to really do that, for all of us really being able to do that?
I think the biggest opportunity I see, I remember what our conversations were 10 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, where, you sort of whisper to each other, I'm having a problem with this. I literally just can't do it on my own. And just the shame around I cannot take care of my kids in this moment, or I'm trying to like be good at my day job and I'm trying to be, a good parent to them. And I have very little support around me or no time. I mean, I remember feeling these as personal problems. I think we all did. And COVID knocked that all wide open. Like, these are not the biggest shift that I've seen in this moment is this is not a personal problem. We are not having personal failures. We're having a massive systemic failure, and it requires a big response. And if we don't come out of this moment demanding really loudly a big response, what are we doing, right? Like, how many women fell out of the labor force? I know the number, 1.6 million moms gone, right? Out of the labor force. 4 million moms women either totally dropped out or can't find work, right? Had to leave, can't find work, unemployed, looking, struggling. That requires a systemic response. If COVID has taught us nothing else, like, we need to build the systems that are going to allow all of us to succeed, to, thrive, as you said, Andrea. That this is the moment, or we have multiple generations who will feel impact from this moment.
Yeah, I'll be quick because my smoke alarm keeps going off. But
It's a sign.
Yeah, right. We have dinner. We have a choice, right? We continue to have a choice of paths we can go down. And I see very clearly one of us demanding change and demanding the rights that should have been given to us a long time ago. And I can also see a path of us continuing to blame each other until we just dissolve into nothing. And I think there's a strong possibility, right? And it's up to the people. And I always point out to my children, look at the people throughout history and look at the spaces in their lives where they had privilege, a little bit of privilege. And what did they choose to do with that? Did they choose to sit down and enjoy their lives? Or did they choose to use that space and breath that have been given to them to advocate for other people? So we all have to get up off of our butts, and I'm not saying kill ourselves to do it, but I'm saying recognize your privilege in whatever situation you are and use it, and tell your story of the times that you didn't have privilege, and don't be ashamed by it, and know that you are putting us on a road. Either way, whatever decision you make, you're putting us on a path, and it's your choice to make as to what we can do. And that's just, that's how organizers talk. So there's other factors.
I just want to say that, all of us kind of like trying to break this mountain down, right? Is this mountain that we're trying to make a road through so that everybody can travel through. And we're like shoveling as we go along. But I think this moment really calls for dynamite, to blow up the mountain, to get it done faster instead of us individually, taking the shovel to the mountain. Right. And the one thing that I really hope what the future bring is really our promise to the Pledge of Allegiance that we say time and time again. Right now, we say it's with liberty and justice for all. But in reality, that's not true. It's with liberty and justice for some. Right. So if we really want to live up to the pledge, what are we going to have to do?
All right. Well, it sounds like these movement mamas are committed to winning liberty and justice for all. I have the honor of thanking each and every one of you for joining us tonight. I just always love, even if it's 60 minutes, just being in space with all of you. Wendy, congratulations on the role you have. And we know you take your organizer values and principles with you into the department, and we are here to now hold you accountable to those. And I just get to say Happy Mama's Day to all you beautiful mamas and everyone listening. It's been a rough year. It's been a wild year. We need a Mother's Month or a Mother's Year, not just a day. But mad love to all of you. And, this work is important. And what's most important is that we take action and we actually move towards an agenda and a vision that puts mamas and mama needs at the center. So again, happy Mother's Day, all of you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.